going to participate in the Peterson Farm panel, if you would come up here, we're going to show a brief video of introduction to Peterson Farms, and then they'll take over and explain what's going on. This is, again, the Farm Bureau top producer, best managed farm in 2015, awarded this year. So I'm going to, hopefully nobody's using a lot of internet. We'll try this, get this video rolling, and we'll get you a quick introduction. Okay. All right. Well, you saw some on the video now. Yeah. He cleans up pretty good. But welcome Bernard, who's representing the family, and they really are a talented group. So one of you have met Bernard before, and he's going to give you the story and introduce him to his team.
I will do that, and I'll introduce these gentlemen right now. While we're sitting here, John Severson has worked with us in our succession plan very intensively. Jack McCalskey with the service. We've been working with them since 2012, and some data management, inventory management. Don McNutt. We started where I'll gosh, I can't tell you exactly when, but we've been working fairly intensively. Been working with John and Lada Harris for the last several years. They're now doing all of our accounting work. Bo Russell, we've worked with him for quite a few years as well, just as to help with our consulting. Norm asked me to do this little talk, and John's going to follow up with some of the business structure and some of the planning that we have done in cooperation with that. Norm asked me just to kind of talk over the top about the history of our operation. This is our new sign. Mo was asking me if it got he was there in June, he wasn't done. It was scheduled to be done in March. So one of those goals that we missed, but it is finished. There you go. Well, here we go. We're going to start in the mid-60s. Now, you can pick out all the Peterson partners from that picture, I'm sure. I bring this up. This was 1965. Our oldest brother, Bill, he was getting ready to go head off to college at that time. Education, not only formal education, but education after school is always important. We're going to talk a little about core values in a minute and some of the things we've written down recently, but they all started right here. But anyway, mom and dad instilled those in us a long time ago. I can promise you everyone in there had something to do with the food that was on the table tonight. And then here we are this winter, shortly after winning the top producer award. All the siblings were there, but a few spouses were missing that particular day. This was Mom's 88th birthday. So we came a long way to get that. These core values that I was referring to, we wrote these down here in cooperation with doing some of the management training and management advancement we've been doing. It's just a matter of fact that they got put on paper. This is nothing new. I think we've been living them a long time. Honest, hardworking, treat others. I mean, it goes down to the values of almost everyone in this room. Treating others like you want to be treated. Work hard. Enjoy your work. And be safe about it. Work together. That's something our partnership has been able to do. I attribute most of that success to our ability to sit down and form a common goal. And in forming that common goal, even though we disagree on a lot of the ways we get there, we're all still working toward that common goal. This is a little timeline for how things have gone. Billy, let's see here, Russian wheat deal, I included that just as a baseline there, because shortly after that was our first hedging account. Obviously, I was not very involved in farming operations at that time because I was about 12. I did what I was told. In 1974, oldest brother Bill left Cornell University. He was working on a postgraduate degree there. He decided it was time to come back home to farm. So, 73, Bill came back, grew our first soybeans in 1973. At that time, we were strictly crops and livestock. Dairy, hogs, we had a few cattle, but mostly just most of the cattle feeding was all dairy replacement scheme grown. In 1974, the old home farm where we lived, it wasn't big enough, so the partnership between my dad and oldest brother, they sold that farm and bought the farm that you saw in the previous video, which is now where our home offices are. 74, that's 74, 75, David came back from university, so now you've got two of the three brothers who would eventually be partners in this operation at that time. We leased some of our first land leasing occurred in 1977. And just for a point of interest, we're still farming that farm. And then on up to the 80s, farrowing hogs. We had formed a partnership with my uncle, milking cows at that time. In 82, that got dissolved. The brothers and dads still moving forward with the partnership. 1990, that's wrong. The dairy operation should be 88. 88 was the last cows we milked. I came back to the farming operation full time in 92. I had been there working part-time prior to that. And then I started referencing some acres because I'll chronicle that with the growth that we've experienced kind of since the mid-80s to now. So 1999, we were farming 3,500 acres. The last cattle left there in 2000, the last hogs left there in 98. I came back in 92. It seemed like I had to tell people for 5 years that we were losing money feeding cattle before they believed me. So anyway, they got gone. I remember some of those discussions. There were differences in opinion there. But in 2001, Albert, who worked for Deere right here, he's an engineer for Deere for 5 years in the harvester works. He came back to join the farming operation in 2001. So now Dad exited in 96 as a partner. One of the real keys, I think, for him as a mentor is he stepped back and let the sons manage early on. I mean, typically I hear farming operations where he's into his 70s and 80s. Dad kind of stepped back when he was around 60. This was before I came back, and I think that was one of the keys to pushing us forward in making decisions and continuing that education. So here we are in 01, farming about 5,000 acres. This is our current grain setup. I bring this up because, well, Danny mentioned joint ventures. This was started in 1967 as a joint venture with my dad and 4 other local farmers. If I can make that one bin right there. It's the second bin on that same foundation. There was a fire in 82. But that bin got built back. That's the only original structure. And this kind of chronicles our growth. 96, 98, 2001, 2003, and then 2006. So those are some of the growth, how the growth occurred and the stories that went with it. Then we've also included here in the middle, we've now updated the dryers you saw in the video. We've updated our drying capacity so we can dry 5,000 bushel an hour with a 40,000 bushel wet tank. That all happened in 13, the drying upgrade. 2002, we farmed 6,000 acres. That was our first grain elevator improvement. We put in a new tower dryer there. Of course, that, as I've already said, that ended that had to get replaced in 13 to upgrade capacity. 7,000 acres in 2010, 10,000 in 11. As you can see, as profitability came, we saw opportunities. We had enough cash to expand. We were expanding very rapidly during this period. Lots of changes, lots of growing pains. We're stumbling through most of them. We still have some to stumble through, I'm sure. All this time, go back to where John's going. Albert's working on a verbal agreement. There is our whole partnership is a handshake. This is still 2011. Literally, if something happened to someone, we would have to believe what someone else said because nothing was written down. And it worked fine, and it would continue to work fine as long as nothing happened. But we were concerned with that issue. So that's when we started our transition planning, which we put into place in February 1 of 13. At that point, we had grown enough. You'll see we hired, this is chief agronomist. We hired him as the first management person outside the family. So that was a big step. We've since hired another young college graduate, well, two actually, because you see here, Albert's little brother Daniel joined us this winter. So he's back. He's back in our farming operation now. So that's kind of where we are now. We're at 18,346 acres for 2015. We've already harvested a wheat crop, which was very average for us. 75 bushel wheat crop. We had terrible weather problems getting it harvested. It was just too wet. Corn crop looks good right now. This is the home place that you saw. We were out in front of that shop when you were looking at that video you just saw. This grain facility is our second facility that we've grown where we maintain the ability to store all of our grain, primarily because we're just in time delivering to the distilling industry. So we're going to start selling corn probably tomorrow or Friday. And we've got enough corn on hand right now to keep the distilleries running. Still another 2 weeks yet, which we've got to maintain that overlap to maintain that service. This shop, see the new roof? We had a fire there 3 years ago, so we're operating out of this temporary office. That's one of our goals is to build our new office, which we'll hopefully see in the next 2 or 3 years. But that's kind of where that is. A little bit of graphing showing some of the growth. The pink line is the farmed acres. Black line is the total harvested acres. You can see that as we've grown, we've continued to double crop a few more acres. Historic corn yields to growth. We've always emphasized production, and you'll see the trend on that's trend line corn for Peterson Farms starting in '96. We're growing at a rate of 3.1 bushels a year, which exceeds the state average, exceeds federal, the national growth average as well. So one of our goals is to maintain that line. 2012 kind of like everybody else sticks out. We had exactly half a crop. It was a good year. Cash sales. That goes right with the growth of acres and production. Equity to, this is a measure of equity to acres. And of course with that growth came a lot of equity growth. We turned that profit right back into the operation. Most of that was done in the form of expanded grain facilities as well as expanded equipment line. Keeping that in mind and maintaining our operating capital in the process. That's about as brief as I can go through that. I can get into a lot more detail about a lot more of the intricacies of what happened. But with that, some uniquenesses we have. We do a lot of non-GMO growing. There are certain parts of the bourbon industry that require non-GMO corn because they believe it has value. So we're growing a lot of non-GMO corn. We're 100% non-GMO soybeans. gaining a premium on both of those. We're doing all of our own applications and trucking in-house. Doing a lot of tile work, a lot of water management work. All that's done with our internal labor force and management. If we go rent a farm, I think we've got a unique advantage. We can walk in with a tile plan or an improvement plan. Typically, that has advantage to working with a new landlord as we go forward. Of course, with just-in-time delivery, as I discussed earlier, we're cleaning grain. Distilleries are requiring high quality grain, so we're cleaning almost every bushel of grain, selling the screenings to local livestock people. Monitoring, of course, we're monitoring everything in those bins we're using Integris for a temperature monitoring system. And like Mo said earlier, rapid adaptation of technology, it pays. We're of the size that you can afford to pay for some of those things that are worth a tenth of a bushel because you spread them over enough bushel it works. We've had a good track record. We treat people fairly. Landlords typically stay with us a long time. I can name you 5 or 6 farms. We started farming in 1980. So, one of our goals is to get good referrals from those people as time goes on. With that, I'll leave you down. Thanks.
Hi, my name is John Severson. I'm president of Transition Point Business Advisors. We're located in beautiful downtown West Des Moines, Iowa. That's our international headquarters. That's our only headquarters, our only office. But we're doing work with small business and family business owners all over the country, and particularly in the ag space. There seems to be a lot of interest, a lot of need for high quality and appropriate processes to do family business succession planning. So, in July, Bernard's oldest brother Bill, and I were invited to participate in the International Farm Management Congress in Quebec this year, and we presented a white paper on the history of Peterson Farms. And I presented on a story of a successful, healthy farm business succession plan. Many people start succession plans and never finish them. And I wanted to share the story of the Petersons, who have a very successful story to tell in the succession planning arena. And by the way, Norm has both Bill's white paper and my white paper that we provided on the FBS website, along with these 6 or 8 slides that I have here. So if you want more detailed reference, I'm trying to do it in 15 minutes, but it really takes about 2 hours to describe. So we want room for the panel to be involved here. So let's see. Am I doing it? Yeah. There we go. Okay. I'll try to multitask. It doesn't work. So, in 2012, I get a call from Mo Russell that says, hey, you need to meet some people in Loretto, Kentucky. I said, where in the world is Loretto, Kentucky? He said, it's a bourbon country. I said, oh, I kind of know where that is. And so got a call from Bernard that said that they'd been visiting with Mo on one of his regular visits, and they were asking him about possibly getting involved in some succession planning because Bernard's nephew and Bill's son, Albert, who you saw in that video, had been involved in the operation for about 11 years and had been promised an equity position in the organization. As Bernard said, nothing had been reduced to paper. Well, Albert's married, has a child, and kind of wondering about his future. And he wanted something a little more concrete than just some verbal thoughts and agreements. And so they decided it was probably time to get involved in some succession planning. And so I asked Mo if he could provide that service. He said, "Nope, I don't do that, but I know who does." And so we referred them to our firm. And our firm is just an independent firm that does nothing but family business consulting. We don't sell insurance. We don't sell lake lots in Florida or Electrolux vacuum cleaners. We only do business succession planning on a fee basis. And so this is the process that we use with all family business owners. And this process has 6 components. We call it the components of our comprehensive business continuity and succession planning, BCSP. And we don't always use these in any particular order, but it's just really important that if we're going to do a business succession plan, that the business has some kind of a business plan and a management system in place. So we have a business to succeed to the next generation. And then a business continuity plan is kind of what we incorporate early in the process to make sure if something bad happens that we're covered. And then the core of our work is in the succession planning arena, where we help families succeed their business management as well as their ownership. And those don't always go in sync. You can transfer management responsibilities before you transfer ownership responsibilities. And what we find is, particularly in the agricultural markets, that many people think succession planning is moving your assets from one generation to the next. Well, that really falls more in the estate planning realm, where we talk about moving our stuff around. And that's not necessarily, it's just a part of the succession planning process, but it is not the succession planning process. We try to dispel that myth. We also involve personal financial planning for any potential exiting owners, so that they're certain that they're going to be able to pay their bills and not have to eat hot dogs the rest of their life if they exit out of the organization. And then finally, we do an annual business review, which we'll describe for you in a minute. So those are the 6 components of a comprehensive business continuity and succession plan. Okay, let's see. And included in that, if I hit the right button here. This is not a single-player process. We believe strongly in having a collaborative advisory team. And in the case of the Petersons, like with all clients, we always want to start with their existing advisors. And so once they engage us to do this work, after we presented them with a proposal, I said, well, okay, tell us who your advisors are. And the primary advisor was the local attorney who also did their tax work, and he was in the county seat nearby. And so we met with him right away and said, well, this is what we've been asked to do, and this is kind of how this works, and this is where we see this going in this case. And I said, great, I've been encouraging to do that for years. I'm glad they finally did it, that thing. And 2 days later, he gives me a call after I get back to Des Moines. He said, I've been thinking about this. The Petersons are wonderful people. They're a well-known family in the area. I don't want to screw this up. If I take this on for them, I'm going to have to fire all my other clients because I don't have the depth of my research and my bench to handle this large of a case. So I want to beg off of the team. So I said, well, just hold on for a minute. And so what we did is went through a search and helped identify 2 or 3 other large law firms in Kentucky that had specialists in the area of business and estate planning. It's kind of like if you have a medical need, you go to your local family practitioner to help operate on your brain tumor. Probably not. So we searched out and found a specialist in the estate business planning area in Lexington. But we kept the original attorney on board because he knows the history. He's dealt with him for 15, 20 years. He knows where all the skeletons are buried. And so he's been a valuable part of the team, even though he's not the lead drafter on some of the special documents that we needed. And then as a result, it was getting a little deep on the tax side, so we already knew that John McNutt was working with the Petersons with the FBS system, so we brought in the rest of this team from Latta Harris to provide some heavy-duty tax and financial accounting for the Petersons. They had also been working with an insurance person that was either kind of retiring or on his way out, I can't remember, but things were kind of not, as we examined their life insurance situation. We don't sell life insurance, but we certainly understand how it can be used as a tool. We found some discrepancies and things were improperly owned. It was going to increase their state tax or reduce it. And so we searched in Kentucky and found an independent insurance advisor that would come in and help be a part of that team. And then and part of our firm, we also have certified financial planners on board. So we kind of created this collaborative advisory team that then went forward with the process of business succession planning for the Petersons. So, Transition Point Business Advisors has a proven 3-phase process. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We found that others have created these wonderful processes. And phase 1 of our process is what we call the diagnostic phase. Again, in a medical analogy, we think it's important to diagnose before you prescribe. I don't want to go to the doctor and have him start cutting on me before he's found out where I hurt. And so we did a complete diagnostic workup for the Peterson Farms family. And came up with where they wanted to be and where they are and what those gaps were. And included in that is we had them each take a very sophisticated personality survey, so we knew kind of who we were dealing with, how they communicated with each other, how they wanted to be communicated with. And that told us a lot about how we needed to approach this, because they might all be family members, all be brothers, but they kind of act differently at different times, so that was really helpful.
John,
what
instrument do you use?
We have used this we call ProScan, but you could use DISC and any number of those that we hardly endorse, but it's a matter what you're used to. We use ProScan. Then after we determined, okay, here's where you're at, here's the diagnosis, here's what we think you ought to pursue, then they decided to go into phase 2. We contract for 1 phase at a time. They could have fired us after phase 1. That's the end of the story. But they elected to go on to phase 2. We must have convinced them that the gaps were enough to work on. They agreed with the gaps. So in phase 2 is where the heavy lifting comes, and we do the plan design and help them get the plan implemented. Some advisors come in and do this wonderful architectural rendering and give you the design and say, okay, now you go get it done. Well, most clients really, that's not where they're trained. They don't want to get that stuff done. This is not the area that they're used to working with, so our process is to stay with them through their implementation process, working with that collaborative advisory team to make certain everything gets shipped, everything gets moved, the documents are right, and everything's flowing well and working together. And that process took about a year. In some families, that process can take 2 to 5 years. But one of the reasons that I actually nominated the Peterson Farms for Top Producer of the Year was because of the way they approached the succession planning and how they stayed with it and stayed at it and really worked on it. And they were one of the most efficient processes we've ever seen as far as their responses to us. They kept appointments. They weren't putting us off for 6 months because they were too busy. And believe me, they're always busy. And so one of the reasons we nominated them for that was for that purpose. And son of a gun, they actually got named as Top Producer of the Year, which I'm pretty pleased about that too. Then the other thing that they've really done well is they followed through with phase 3. After the first year, you might say, well, our plan's in place, we can kind of go off and do the next thing. No, you're never done with this kind of planning. So phase 3 involves the sustainability review process. So once a year in March, we get together for a whole day. We usually meet in Lexington at the lawyer's office because it's a great big board table. And we have all the advisors there with the Peterson brothers and nephew Albert, and we invite the spouses. The spouses kind of like to know what's going on. They don't want to know how the watch is made, but they still want to know what time it is. And so they're willing to come once a year because we have a nice party at the end. Peterson's do have nice parties. And so we have a good celebration dinner after that all-day meeting. But we go through every document and every portion of their plan, all their financials, all their legal documents, to say, what have we missed? Has anything changed? Has Congress met? Have they changed the rules on this again? Now we can adjust. And so that's an annual process that takes place. So that's really phase 3 of a comprehensive succession planning process. And so again, here's our typical core planning team. Usually involves an insurance person, a tax person, a legal person, a business advisor, a personal financial planner. Although we're finding a lot of farmers don't have personal financial planners. We're not sure why, but we're encouraging them to get personal financial planners, which really helps in the process. And then they often have an auxiliary team of maybe appraisers and bankers and real estate people and others that we have to call on occasionally. And so our job is to come alongside the client and help them control and manage this team. Because the client usually doesn't want to be the manager of the team, they just want the benefits of having the team. So part of our obligation as the succession planner is to help manage the advisory team. And guess what? The other advisors in the team, once they understand it, really appreciate it, because they get more done too, and they can see how we're all working together collaboratively instead of all offering our advice and the client sitting in the middle trying to interpret all these different things that we're telling them. So that's really worked pretty well for Peterson's. So the other thing to keep in mind is in a family business, you're wearing different hats. You know, if we look at Bernard here, he had a nice cap on there in the video. So he has a cap on. He's a member of his family. He's got a great wife and 2 daughters. And he's also a part owner of the operation. And he does work alongside staff. At any given moment of the day, he's wearing one of those hats. Sometimes he changes hats several times a day. He's also an uncle. He's a brother. So he's got that family hat on. And when you're working in family businesses, you have to keep in mind, at this particular moment, which hat do I really wear? And so in the process, as Bernard said, when we came upon the scene, we had different members of the family own different pieces of property, and there was no really operating entity. They were all filing Schedule F as individual farmers. And so we said, well, let's see if we can put some entity structure together here. So this is our entity structure that we have currently in place as of this year. And it's pretty small, but I'll kind of describe it here. We have really 3 primary entities. We took the land that everyone owned and put it into an LLC. And we call it the William B. and Rosemary Land Holdings LLC. William B. and Rosemary Peterson are Bernard's parents. And so we named it after them. And so because everyone owned disparate amounts of land and owned it different ways, we put that all into an LLC. Except for the home place, which is owned 50% by Bernard's older brother Bill and their father. Okay? And so then we formed a grain and equipment company, a sub-S corporation, to hold all the grain handling equipment and the machinery. So why would we do that? How about protecting against some liability issues? They've got grain trucks. Have you ever been in central Kentucky and seen how those roads are? They got grain trucks driven by 19-year-old young men, and all they need to do is hit one school bus loaded full of kids, and the whole operation just went up in smoke. So we wanted to protect against that. So we've got all the equipment, that type of thing in that S corp. That S corp is owned by each of the 3 brothers who also have a revocable trust now. So the revocable trust each own 25% of that equipment company. Then in the middle, we have Peterson Farms General Partnership. Now, normally a business doesn't like to be a general partnership for what reason? You've got unlimited liability among the partners. But there's something called FSA. And they kind of get in our life and get in our way. So FSA says, you want our payments, you got to be nothing more than a general partnership. You can't limit your liability. So we did the best we could to put the land over in a limited liability company to help limit liability, and put the grain handling and all the machinery in an S corp to help limit liability there. So the only thing we have in the farm partnership are crops and bank accounts. It's just kind of a flow through. And so that operating entity leases land from the land LLC that leases equipment from the S corp. And so it's all done on a very upscale business basis. That operation has 8 partners, and each one of those partners is an LLP. See, that's a hard one to say. So we've limited liability between the partners by each of the partners of that general partnership being a limited liability partnership. And so let's see, Bernard, you're right there, and let's see that. Yep. You're Burnett LLP, and that is Sam Carr. I can't remember how you name those, but I get them all mixed up. But you know what they are. So they each own an equal percentage of that partnership. So what we did to bring nephew Albert into all this is we allowed him to buy into the partnership here and to the S corp. So now he finally has on paper officially his ownership share in this entity, tied to buy-sell agreements that say if he passes away, the operation has to buy his shares from the corporation, from the partnership, so he knows where his wife and his daughter stand. And in fact, we also put in place a separate little LLC called Peterson Life Interest. And the specialist attorney from Lexington put this together. I'd never seen this done before. But he put together a special LLC to own life insurance on each of the partners. So if we lose one of the partners, that LLC will then supply the money to the partnership to buy out their heirs, and yet keep all the life insurance out of their taxable estate. And we normally see this being used with the American Life Insurance Trust, but then you have all these crummy notices and all that stuff that goes with it. And so this it's a special LLC to hold the new life insurance that the new insurance advisor put in place is securing all that. So now Albert knows what his future is as far as his career. He also knows what his future is for his family if he gets wiped out, or if any of his uncles or his father gets wiped out. So there's just a lot more certainty for that next generation when you have this kind of a situation in place. And that's really what I think precipitated a lot of this. And as far as I know, Albert is one happy camper. Isn't that right? Someday. See, now he got his uncle hat on again. Okay. Let's see.
Those individual life insurance policies each on each other, or do they have a first to die policy?
Those policies are on each partner's life. Okay, they're not joint life policies or survivor life policies like you often see in couple situations. And each policy is owned by and payable to that LLC. That LLC has agreements with various entities to supply the capital to buy out their interest at the end of the death. It's really a pretty neat deal the way that was formed. Yes?
Question on the sub-S versus the LLC on the grain holding and the equipment. Why did you go with the sub-S in that particular case?
I believe that was Larry Harris's idea. It was sub-S.
Managing taxation.
It was a tax, income tax management, essentially, yeah. Okay? And then this is really cool. Right button. We got two things going at once. Within the last year, our firm also has a specialist in what's called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS for short. And you can learn more about that. There's a book written by a man by the name of Gino Wickman out of Michigan. The book is called Traction. You can order it on Amazon. And in the book Traction, it talks about structuring your organization from a management perspective so we know who's in what seat on the bus, what roles and responsibilities that they have. And earlier going with the Peterson family, we'd asked them to create their own roles and responsibilities chart. Well, you know, it's one of those things you just never get around to. So we introduced them to this EOS system, which kind of does it for you. And so, in effect, what we have right now is there's always a visionary. Usually a visionary is one of the more mature people in the organization that's always looking out ahead to see what new things can we do. They go to all kinds of conferences, bring back all kinds of bright, shiny new ideas, and some of which are adopted. And so Bill's in charge of culture, new ideas, new enterprise, diversification, and business relationships. Then the next person on the chart is the integrator. If you happen to see it in some of Bernard's slides, he's Bernard Peterson, integrator. Integrator would be more like the chief operating officer in conventional terms, but the integrator is responsible for implementing the vision, strategic planning, resource allocation, and leadership and management and accountability. The integrator takes the visionary's ideas and says, okay, the rest of you, here's how this is going to work. And so you kind of have this reporting structure. And then we have several other divisions here. We've got Bernard also wears another hat. He's in charge of sales and marketing. And then his nephew Albert is the operations director. And then his brother David is the grain facility and quality person. And Christy, who's about in the back row, Christy, raise your hand, with her Peterson Farm shirt on, is in charge of accounting and finance. And we refer to Christy as Bernard's other wife because she's the sister of Bernard's wife, and they look a lot alike. You get confused sometimes. So, you know. It works for them. And she's been a great addition because Bernard was wearing that hat before as well. So you wonder what happened to Bernard's hair? Now we understand. And then they have a chief agronomist, as he talked about. Scott is not a family member, a person in charge of maintenance, a person in charge of crop, a person in charge of land and water, application. So now you've got this organizational structure. Yes?
Who takes care of landlords?
That would be up here. I believe that's Billy.
Sales and marketing.
Oh, you're doing that too? Okay, sorry.
It's in there, yeah.
It's in there. It's in sales marketing.
It's really a good effort.
Yeah. They've been doing it for years. How many landlords do you have now? It's about 50?
92.
92. See, they keep growing. I can't keep up with how many landlords. That's a lot of relationships to manage. But is that important? You bet it's important. In fact, I've been told that certain people that have land for rent will come to Peterson Farm and say, will you please rent our land because we know you're going to take care of it. And you know why that is? Because it's one of their values. Integrity is one of their value systems. This whole entrepreneurial operating system starts with your core values. And they have their core values now on paper because our EOS process asks them to put it on paper. And you know what they do with that paper? They post it, and everyone in the organization, all the way down to the lowest truck driver, knows what the value system is of Peterson Farms. That's really important from a management perspective. And we've implemented this in our own business about 4 years ago, and it's incredible. If you don't have a values match when you hire a new person, in 2 years they'll be gone. Either you will fire them or they'll self-select out. And so this whole issue of getting your core values not only down on paper, but distributed amongst the rest of the population that you control is really important. They're doing a great job in that. Okay, so I think one of the things that we learned in the Peterson's case is that they've gone for years without this kind of organizational structure, without a succession plan, and they're really blessed because nothing happened. There were no deaths, there were no disabilities, there were no divorces, there were no daughter-in-law problems, there was no discord. But they are, and we are recommending that people really consider succession planning before one of these events occurs. Because after they occur, then it's really too late to start with your plan, and you're going to deal with the results of not having a plan in place. So, questions? Answer them all. Well, we're going to let the panel kind of answer any other questions. And if you want to know more about me, I've got a bio in the back. It's on the website. Yes?
What's the 5-year plan?
Ready? Do you want to answer that?
In reference to what now, as far as growth, or be more specific for that? With that.
Well, there's several dimensions I wanted to answer.
Several dimensions growth. I'm much like Mo. I believe there are a lot of opportunities that are going to present themselves to us. We've tried to position ourselves financially so we can take advantage of those. I would expect some growth to occur, but that's not one of our goals. Our goals is to enter into the opportunities that are good for Peterson Farms that match our core values, and when they meet those criteria, we will act on that endeavor. If they don't, hopefully we're wise enough to leave them alone.
Does that mean you're going to buy more of the land that you're now renting?
In a growth phase, there's not enough cash to buy land and infrastructure both typically. That's what we've seen in the past 10 years. So, yes, I'd like to own the land, but is it possible? Probably not. Especially not at land prices where they are today. Went to a land auction a month ago just to keep people honest. And the second bid sent me home. It went for at least $2,000 an acre more than we were willing to pay.
Roughly, you've gone up to 18,000 acres from 5 or so million to average. Is it all primarily been renting ground, or have you have kind of a balance? You try to keep some business on the ground?
We bought some ground during that time. The most significant purchase we made in 2008. We turned around last year and sold it, primarily to generate cash. We had a doctor that wanted it really, really badly, and we put some strings and first right of refusal on rent, first right of refusal on purchase. He said okay, so he said, well, you can't sell it unless we say it's okay, so we did that. Some other small tracts have been bought during that time as well.
So you had a successful plan, but what are the things that you still think you really need to be working on, or do you have them all solved? I know that's a loaded question.
No. Labor management is still an issue. I can brag highly on the team of people we have working with us. They're good. They're dedicated. We still need to watch our costs there, both equipment and labor. We're like every other person that rents ground in this room. We're trying to figure out ways to reduce that rental cost. We've initiated that with quite a few variable rent contracts over the last 4 years. There are some owners that don't understand that, and if someone doesn't understand it, you'd sooner go talk to a fence post and try to explain it to them. That's been our experience. Grandma doesn't understand it. The land investor group, they'll talk to you all day. They grasp that concept. They say, "Oh, it's a 10-year deal. When things are good, I get paid. When things are bad, I don't get paid as much." But they're bullish agriculture, so they're fine. So the business, that side is easy on the local owners. It's a little more difficult.
This is John again. I have something else I should add here. As far as there's the future for the succession plan, when we put that land in the LLC, that land is going to stay in that LLC like forever, and that land is not purchasable by anyone other than a family member, and not even in-laws. Okay? And so that land and your interest in the LLC is able to be passed down from generation to generation, even if a future generation person is not active in the operation. Okay, so they can always be part of Peterson Farms, even if they're married to a dentist in Boston. Okay? So they're going to get, because it's an LLC, it's passed through, they're going to get their proportionate share of any land rent profits and so on. But on the equipment side, on the general partnership side, yes, you can be a partner or a shareholder there. Only active participants on the farm. See the differentiation? And that way, we're trying to help eliminate future conflicts with off-farm heirs that are trying to say, "Hey, we have a little higher dividend out of our S Corp this year. Quit buying all that new machinery." Those are the conflicts you get into when you have off-farm heirs in operating entities. So that's all part of their agreements there, as far as their operating agreements on the partnership, operating partnership, and the equipment at S Corp. Not possible unless you want to show up and 5 o'clock in the morning with your bib overalls on, then you can be part of that, okay? Like Albert is, and like his younger brother now, Daniel, will have an opportunity to be part of that because he's showing up with his bib overalls on. Does that make sense? And so that was kind of the conundrum. How do we keep this farm together as a family unit? How do we keep our children involved? Bernard has 2 daughters that really have no interest in farming at this time, but they know that they're always going to be part of Peterson Farms because after Bernard and Ned are gone, they're going to own that proportionate share of the land holdings and they'll have an income stream from that. Yes?
Prenups?
No prenups in the current generation, but future generations will be limited to spousal ownership anyway, so that takes that out.
I have a question on your buy-sell agreements. You have life insurance if something should happen to somebody to buy out the heirs, but if somebody chooses, if somebody's exiting, if they're cashing out or retiring or whatever, how do you do that financially? Are they taking a discount in order to cash out? Are they taking it over time? How do you handle somebody leaving the business?
Because that's an area of controversy that has not been solved yet. But we're very near that. Billy, my oldest brother Billy's 68, and by the end of the year is our goal to have that figured out, because we, as an operating entity, we know that we've got to get the cash available to get him bought out, because it's not going to be that long. My other brother Dave is 65. He's in the same shoe. So to avoid having 2 people simultaneously trying to move out of the organization and take cash, we're trying to make a plan to let the operating entity move forward without going broke to buy people out.
Yeah, in fact, in our business continuity process, we actually had the insurance agent go look about the same issues. What if one of the active partners gets disabled? And there is such a thing as disability buyout insurance. It's very, very difficult, almost impossible to obtain for people in operating farms. Apparently there's some hazards. People get hurt once in a while, I don't know. So we even tried to address it for disability, but the main focus of our annual business review last March was this very issue of how do we finance a retiring partner. But we didn't let that issue hold up the rest of the process. So that is what we're working on now as we speak this year, and we should have that finalized by the first of next year.
Just one follow-up then. Setting aside Peterson's individual issues, you do this with lots of farms. What are some of the approaches that these farms take? Whether it's retirement or a partner is leaving, setting us not disabled and not passing away, but just leaving. How do you fund that? How do you value it?
The default option for funding is usually a note over a period of time, usually a minimum of 10, sometimes 15 or 20 years with some advance payments possible in good years, and we defer in bad years. You got to keep in mind that Eggs and New Partner wants the operation to be successful because now he's in the banking business. Okay, he is now owed money by the operation. He does not want to break that operation trying to get him paid out. So it has to be reasonable between them. And in fact, but we talk about discounts, and we're trying not to apply discounts to an exiting owner for that reason. Now that in some other adversarial situation, there could be discounts. I believe we've got like a 35 or 40% discount applied. So you can do that all in your operating agreements and in your buy-sell agreements. That's why each one of those are custom designed per case. That's where you need really high-powered accounting and legal advice to get that accomplished. John, did you want to address that?
Another thing, we noticed how we split the assets into different groupings so that the land asset did not have to get bought out with retirement. That you were able to buy out the operating assets and say the equipment company or just the inventories in the operating company. Trying to make the pieces small enough that somebody could actually do some exchange of ownership. And that's a problem as large as some of our operations are becoming. Just to get it to a manageable level, which is what they're wrestling with at the moment. How do we do this without wrecking the ongoing operation?
And was the use of the LLP instead of single member LLCs for self-employment tax reasons, primarily?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not the tax accountant, but yes. And there was a lot of thought in that structure. John's office had proposed a basic plan. Initially, it went through all the advisors, everybody kind of what they liked and what they didn't like, and that was part of this whole process of using a team, of interacting. John had leadership on that, but we brought everybody's ideas in and worked towards the best solution we could come up with.
I mean, at that point, at those sessions, no Petersons were involved. We just had the advisory team together working on behalf of the Petersons, trying to bring our best recommendation to them so they're not the sorting process. They have other things to do. And that causes confusion. And when people get confused, you know what they do? Nothing. It stops the process. And that's not a successful plan. It stops the process. So we spent lots of time together virtually. This GoToMeeting is Skype is a wonderful device, by the way. And trying to come up with collectively what would work the best from everyone's perspective on that advisory team, and that's what we then presented to the family. Yes?
If you put any limits on what a retiring partner can take out as a return for the purpose of conserving cash within the operation.
We can put any limits on what a retirement partner can take. That has not been clarified.
That's part of what has to be done. That's part of what has to be done, but still, we've still got that common goal to maintain a viable business, and so as long as all the partners are working to that end, they would not do that. One of the thought processes on a retiring partner is just a cash payout, a sum of money annually plus all returns to equity. And then they lose whatever that payment is say 1%. So in 25 years they would own nothing, but they would get that return to equity for that period. That's one thought we've had. We don't know how to perfect that yet, but that's kind of where we're leaning on the retiring partner. John, you should say something about that.
Yeah, John, why don't you talk about another group that we're part of?
Danny, John, and myself, with some others, Lance Woodbury, Joe Kluger, Nick Hubel, Bob Yard, are all members of a grouug called FamilyBusiness.ag, which you can look up our website. Anyway, that group of people are really focused on the advisors that advise your family farms about coming up with an approach which is based on what we talk about here with Peterson's, where you don't get advisors in silos, you get advisors that work with each other, because these things are so complex. If you don't have a variety of input and ideas and being able to work across, it's pretty hard to be successful. And I think this was a great example of that working that way.
Question back here.
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
When you're talking about the buyouts and all that for retirees, do you have a next generation that's looking at buying it too as a potential where it can be kind of a trade-off, or is there not really much of a next generation?
The management people we have hired are both on a profit sharing plan with goals, I think, of being partners. Partnership is set up such that it is a unanimous vote for any partner to come in. You'll never be a partner with someone you don't want to be a partner with. But I can tell you, the people we have there, once this gets worked out and they wish to be partners, we'll find a way to work them in. They fit our values.
You have a page where it has to follow the bloodline?
No, we purposely did not do that. Primarily, I mean, my brother David's got girls, I've got girls, and nothing against girls being in a partnership. But of the four of them, none are interested today, and all indications are they probably won't be. So we knew to maintain this business moving forward, there would have to be some outside people at least during certain generations.
In our diagnostic process, part of the process is interviewing not only the partners, their spouses, but all of the adult children, anyone over 16. So we found that out very early in the process, that there just wasn't much interest among many of the Generation 3, let's call it, to become part of the farming operation. Well, that's an important piece of information. And yet, the one thing that will not change is the land. The land has to stay in the bloodline. But the equipment company and the operating company, we can bring in highly qualified people. We've got some cases where there are no more bloodline in the operating company. It's all operated by professionally hired folks and owned by the land is still owned by family members who love getting dividends, even if they live in California or Florida. So it's important to separate the land out from these operating entities when you have that discussion. That really helps solve that problem. I was going to ask Mo, you're the one that got us involved in all this. What are your thoughts?
To answer Dr. Dawson's question, how will it look 5 years down the road? Vern's already mentioned a plan needs to be developed to buy out partners. Backup management needs to be developed for all 4 partners. And so there's always going to be a to-do list at Peterson Farms.
But one of the advantages of having structure, not that I like structure, you can't tell, is now you know what seats on the bus have to be filled and backfilled when somebody wants to retire or something happens to somebody. Without that, it's kind of, well, what do we do next, guys? No, we have a plan, and you got people that are coming up down here that can eventually fill some of those management spots. So that helps you get a vision for what you want to, what needs to be done in the future, even though you don't have it exactly planned out. But at least you know kind of what seats on the bus you're trying to fill with what skill sets and what attitudes.
On your life insurance LLC, is that on both spouses, or is it just on?
No, just on the partner. It's just on the partners of the operating entities, because that's all that can be bought. You can't buy anything out of the land LLC.
Right, but the partners in the operating entity your husband and wife.
Oh, I got to what you're saying. Yes, yeah, and we did not do it on the spouses. No, you're right. I'm sorry. Operating entity is split. Each of those spouses own 12.5%. I think it is. Yeah. We figured that if the active partner was still in there and working, they could get that. But we're in fact the estate plan for each of them. Now, each have their own individual estate plan. As a result of all this, those shares of that partnership would go to if something happens to Bernard's wife, her shares are not going to be bought out. They're going to be owned by Bernard. Right. So now his family unit still owns 25% of the operating company. So we really didn't need it on the non-active spouse.
So in the case of Bill, when he's bought out, or your other brother, will you continue to keep that insurance, or is it more of a key man and you're going to reduce that insurance if he's bought out of?
The plan for that, in the event of Bill's buyout, until he's fully bought out, we're going to keep the insurance in place in case he dies along the way, and then we can continue to wipe out that note, essentially, to his wife, Susan. Yeah. Okay. Yes?
Roughly, what is something like this to get this set up cost?
Oh, it's really inexpensive. I'm not going to answer that.
And in our case, it was around $250,000. That's what it wound up costing. All in, all done.
And then they have annual maintenance.
Yes, and I encourage them to look at it as an investment rather than a cost. I was introduced to the operation at the point Bernard said it was just a big DBA on a handshake, and I got back on the plane and broke into a cold sweat. And yeah, they spent some money on it, but I don't use it as a cost. It's an investment.
They have in Albert a very serious next generation player that had been promised over and over again a role and a position that they were unable to deliver on without going through this process. So that's why it becomes an investment. That family now has a future that if they would have broken that promise or been unable to fulfill it, who knows what would have happened, but it probably would not look like it could.
Gary, the one thing I'm just a little farmer here, but if you don't have somebody, Mo gave me advice. I found him by accident. He sent me to Mr. Severson. He doesn't remember me, but my wife and I spent some time. He told us we were further ahead than most people we talked about. But it's kind of like, and you might agree, maybe Mo gave you the idea to talk to this man, or some of them up there. But I told an old seed kale salesman rep, if you go to a lobster, if you want lobster or restaurant, if you have to ask the price, you shouldn't be there. That's the same way with seed. If you have to ask the price of seed, you best buy the best technology. That's just the whole farmer's advice. But I've learned a lot from Mo. But if I want to know where to go to get help, I call him first. Because he knows a lot of people. But I think you might agree with this one. Yes.
Yeah, I recommend everyone always call Mo first.
But I heard you speak at a seminar, because that's where I met you.
Yeah, was it a Farm Journal Legacy Project?
No, it's one of those.
Oh, on the Mo's conference. Oh, yeah, yes. Okay. Which is coming up? Want to give a commercial on your conference, Mo? Sure.
Yeah, we've had a summer conference for 16 years, and we found out that farmers today get information a lot differently than what they did 16 years ago. And their schedules are a lot more demanding. And Gary Benson has attended all 16, the only person in our group that has. But the challenge we found was that we couldn't attract that 30 to 50-year-old farmer who has kids that play ball until the end of July, and then they got State Fair and then they'd like to get a little bit vacation in. And so we're going to move it to December, and we're really excited about attracting that group.
Where will it be?
It'll be in Minneapolis at the downtown convention center, and there's a train that goes directly to the Mall of America.
What would you do that for?
What were the dates?
December 2nd.
Yes.
I have more of a comment than a question. I would like to say thank you for sharing all this. Where were you 25 years ago when my grandfather died? So I'm not, that I'm just thinking, if anybody's in here and hasn't set this up, this is family's.
I was at TPAP second year. Neil Harrell was speaking, and someone asked a question much like that. I said, Neil, what do we do? He said, Dad passed away last year. We know what he said he wanted to do, but everybody's in disagreement on what we should do. And he said, Mr. Harrell, what should we do? And he said, I'm sorry. I can't help you. So you got to do it. You got to talk while people are alive. I mean, it's kind of blunt, but at the same time, you got to do it sooner instead of later.
Did you have pushback from the other brothers?
All through the process here and there, but never anything major.
Can I share what we did as an intermediate step? Do you remember what day you spent with the folks in Lexington?
Yeah.
After we did our diagnostic and right before we got into the design implementation, we knew that the issue was going to be for Albert, at what level and what price is he going to come into this thing? What's this thing worth for his share? And, a lot of people fight over price, no matter who you are, family or non-family. And so normally when you think about bringing in a mediator, what are you thinking of? You're usually settling a dispute before it goes to court, okay? And so in this case, we helped find that we processed and found that a mediator in the Lexington area that we hired for one day to help them come together as three brothers to work out the price issue amicably, but with an outside facilitator. And I think it cost $2,500 to do that. It was worth every nickel because that was no longer an issue. They came together as a group and said, well, this is what we can agree on, but they could not do that on their own. I couldn't do it on my own. You need somebody from the outside that doesn't have an axe to grind. And so it's kind of a unique use of a mediator, but I'd rather use a mediator that way than on the backside pending a lawsuit. And I'll give them credit for one more thing, and that is it all has to do with their family values. This is the way these guys were raised. When they first engaged us, we were down in Loretto, and I had a little time one afternoon in between talking to these guys, and so I took my video camera and went up to his mom and dad's place, which was right on the farm. And they didn't know me from a bale of hay, but they agreed to meet, which was really kind of a miracle. But they agreed to meet, and I sat there for 2 hours and kind of interviewed them to get their story of where they came from and what values they passed on to the next generation. If you could ever see that 2-hour video, you would understand how this group comes together because family is ultimately important. If family wasn't important, this may not have worked out so well. So that's one of those core values. And that's where you need to start. And many technicians don't want to start with core values. They want to start with documents and spreadsheets and all that good stuff. I love all that stuff too, but you need to start with those core values. And I believe firmly that that's what's really helped the Petersons get to where they are and where they're going to go in the future. And unfortunately, we lost Berner's dad in June of this year. So that's been a tough transition for them. He was 9 years old. But we still have him on video talking about his history. For his great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, we're all about preserving that heritage for future generations because that's what makes these farms hold together ultimately. Well, it's 3 o'clock. We on time, Norm?
You got some more time? Any other loose ends from Jack or
I'm just happy to be here. Can't add to all this, obviously. Our experience with Bernard and the team goes back to meeting here at this conference 4 years ago, and we were new to the market, new technology, and it was really characteristic and back to their values. I mean, that played out even from the standpoint of working with a company like ours on the technology side. and that everything was a lot of questions, right? Questions we didn't necessarily have answers to, and to some degree we don't have answers to totally today. And so constantly, he and his organization constantly pushed us, and hopefully we've responded to in kind as part of a partnership. And I think it's just characteristic of what they've done from a total business perspective. So we just appreciate being part of all that.
Okay, any more questions? This has been really great. We really appreciate Bernard really opening up his family background, sharing so much of what was going on in their operation. I had the privilege one day having lunch over at his parents' house, and that was a neat experience. Family getting expressed and I've met everybody individually, but just having seen that in operation. We're running a little ahead of time, and I think what we're going to try, we got a race scheduled at 3:15. I think we've got some goodies outside, or they're right here. Okay, and let's try to get together at 3:20. Now, there's one other request I have before you. Some of you may be taking off for the cruise. Inside of your packet is an evaluation form, and we want you to, if you happen to be leaving today, get that filled out. Give some feedback, what you like, what we can improve, and we want to give certainly encouragement and thanks to our speakers, and we'll pass that on if this was helpful to you. So we'll go ahead and.
I would say they can leave the evaluations if they want on the paper right after the have you told them about meetings to go down to?
But we'll talk about that at the end. But we are just as what's going to happen at 6 o'clock. We're going to leave from the lobby. Those of you going on the cruise, we'll gather down the lobby. We'll make sure that everybody gets a ride down there, and you have to find your own way back. Make friends with people so you can ride back. But it's very important to leave at 6. The boat pulls out at 6:30, not 6:31, 6:32. Have your water boat. You're late, so we want to make sure everybody makes the boat tonight and plans to make that. So we're meeting down in the lobby, hotel lobby, at 6 o'clock tonight, and go from there. Is that what Cheryl, that's a major question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's give our panel and Bernard.